You're now recording. Oh yes, Sherry, if you do have to leave early, don't worry at all. We'll share the full presentation afterwards because we know everyone has things they have to get to, but we want to get all of Kevin's great information out to everyone. Okay, official introductions. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Julia Gavin. I'm a board member with New Hampshire UXPA. We really appreciate having all of you join us this evening for a great presentation from Kevin Philpott on building an environment that fosters innovation. Kevin is the head of product design at Pi Insurance, and I know we're all really excited to hear more about his information and his experience. Excuse me. If you didn't hear me earlier, we are recording. And then if you want to let us know where you're tuning in from or where you heard about the event this evening, feel free to drop it in the chat. That helps us get the information out to all the right pages to get information out to everyone. We are the New Hampshire chapter of the User Experience Professionals Association. Our meetings are always open and free to everyone. If there's an event coming up that you think a friend would be interested in, even if they're not into UX, invite them. We would love to meet them. We have lots of social links that Cal has shared. Our website is up there. We also have a Facebook group, Twitter. We have a Slack channel and community and a listserv. We've also been updating our LinkedIn group recently, which Cal's doing a great job with. And that seems to be where a lot of people are hearing from us recently. These are our 2022 board members. Christine is traveling this evening, but she'll be back next week. And Cal and Tara, if you want to wave to our lovely friends. And my name is Julia. So thank you for joining us this evening. There are lots of upcoming UX events in the next few months. I will put links to all of these in the chat box towards the end of Kevin's presentation, so you don't have to try to write anything down right now. Interaction 22 is March 2nd through 4th, and it's all online this year. Rosenfeld Media has Advancing Research 2022, which is March 9th through 11th. The Festival of UX and Design is being put on by UX London. And this, we actually have a few free passes available for. So if you are available and interested, March 21st through 25th, for London time zones, we will be raffling off 3 of the passes at the end of the evening. So please put your name in the chat box and I will work on the raffle. You will have to be here at the end of the talk to confirm that you are one of the winners. So you have to stick with us. The Health Experience Design Conference by MadPal is April 11th and 12th. And then this User Experience and Developers Conference is May 24th through 26th. The UXR Conference put on by learners is June 6th and 7th this year. The remote tickets are free this year, it looks like Kyle mentioned. Job opportunities. So Autodesk, DECA, and Emerson Ecologics have some UX of different levels available right now. Flex has a couple co-ops, which I thought might be interesting for some of our other peers. Meltwater, which doesn't often have design opportunities up, has a new senior product designer. And Pearson and Concord has a couple different levels of designer and research available right now. They look like they are more open to remote. Fidelity in Manchester has a lot of high level positions available right now. They are more looking for on-site people, it does look like. Now it's your time to shine. Are you a job seeker? Are you looking for a new opportunity, or are you hiring? Please feel free to drop your information in the chat or come off mute and introduce yourselves and share any opportunities.
I have an opportunity I'd like to mention. I also wanted to mention that actually the Information Architecture Conference is going to happen in April, and I dropped in the URL for that. I'm on the advisory board for that event. It will be completely virtual again this year. Love to have people come. It's a really nice kind of bridging group that is got a mix of user experience and information architecture. And I have 2 open roles, a senior and an intermediate level designer at SureScripts. Unfortunately, these are not remote. You have to be able to come into an office either in Raleigh, North Carolina, Minneapolis, or Virginia in the DC area. So if you have any interest in that, I've posted a link to the role, and you could reach out to me via this chat or LinkedIn.
Oh, the ice cream. Great, thank you, Samantha.
I've got one.
Go for it.
My name is Doug North. I work at a company called InterSystems in Cambridge. It's a software company that deals primarily with database management, and it's been around since, if you can believe this, 1978, privately held. And in addition to database management, has branched out in more recent years to start developing software to address the needs of the healthcare industry. So we are looking for UX folks for sure, senior UX designers, beginning UX designers, whatever the appropriate term is for that. We have a listing on the website for UI designer. I read the description, and to me, it sounds like a UX developer, and that would be in the UX team, not in a development team. So if you're interested in that, you can certainly check out the website, and I will throw my email, dnorth@intersystems.com, into the chat. And if you want to drop me a line, I'd be happy to speak with you more about any of these opportunities. Currently, it's sort of a hybrid model, a few days in the office and other days elsewhere. For example, I'm in New Hampshire, and I'm making it work.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Vivian says that Hanover Insurance Group is hiring a UX analyst and UX designer. Shared the link. And then Annalise has some information on posts at Science 37. Kevin McGrath says, I have a mentee who has a bit of freelance and bootcamp experience doing UXR and is interested in early career UX research position. If anyone has any leads, be very grateful. Feel free to connect with Kevin if you have any ideas. And any other, yes, any other job seekers or opportunities to share?
I'll raise my hand. Oh, somebody else?
Nope, Sharon, you're up.
Okay, I was going to say I'll do a job seeker since that's what I am. And I've actually been teaching at General Assembly full time for the last, 6 years, but I've decided I'm ready to start building products myself instead of teaching people how to do them. So I've been looking at design strategist roles, also experience design, really love to facilitate. So a lot of things working with clients are kind of my zone of genius and sweet spot. And then I'll just give a pitch too. I have dozens and dozens of great students who are looking for those early roles. So if you do want to talk to me about that as well, I'd be happy to give you some recommendations. I will put my LinkedIn in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, did I miss anyone else? I think we're good. Cool. All right, and feel free to keep dropping LinkedIn or any other information into that chat. We do share the chat after the fact as well. And that brings us to you, Kevin. Kevin comes to us this evening as the head of product design at Pi Insurance, and he will be speaking about building an environment that fosters innovation. We're very excited to learn more about that, and I just lost my screen. Okay, well, I had some very lovely opening notes for you, Kevin, but I just lost all my notes. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, I'll make some stuff up.
Yeah, you're good. I feel that Irish connection with you. We can get through it. Okay, well, I will stop sharing my screen and you are welcome to begin when you're ready, Kevin.
All right, let us get into it. And what I'll say to folks, particularly anyone that joined a little late, is I'm pretty casual. So please do feel free to ask questions as we go along. Julie, if you can keep me honest, and if there's anything popping up in chat, just let me know in case I miss it, but happy to chat and stop as we go through. So let me share my screen because it's impossible for people to talk to each other without some sort of PowerPoint deck anymore. So we'll do that. Cool. All right. It is standard these days to say number, insert other things to do X things. So that's how I've titled this presentation. So this is 10 ways to foster innovation. And we're going to chat through some of that today. Let me put this into a slide share mode. I put in my own intro here because I knew somebody would forget the intro notes. So that's good. I don't know if you guys know what this is, but I learned recently that the in the biz name for a slide like this is the NASCAR slide, because it's a bunch of logos on a page, right? Just like you'd see on a NASCAR. A NASCAR car, I don't know if that's true or not. Can someone in the chat should definitely let me know the answer to that. Okay, great, NASCAR car. So I have worked previously with Geico, currently work with Pi Insurance, which is an insurtech, worked with IBM and, designing lots of different things, and did some research for other places that you might recognize. And I'm on some councils and have done some talks. So this is the slide where I'm like, oh, look at me, I'm great. And you all go, oh, wow, he's credible. And so we'll check the box there and we'll move on from that. Okay. We're going to talk about innovation. I did a very, very long time ago do a master's on innovation and spent a couple of weeks trying to define innovation, and then realized that nobody really knows how to define innovation and everyone's got their own thing. So I'm going to basically call this bringing any new ideas, problem solving ideas into the market or into use, right? And you can read this quote here, but basically, if you do read the literature on innovation, it's one of the few things where there's pretty unanimous agreement that, hey, this is important for generating value in companies, being competitive and being effective, right? So that is why innovation is important to think about. And because this is UXPA, and because I have built my career around user experience and UX, I suppose I better say that I think UX people can really play a strong role in fostering innovation in organizations. And there's a few reasons for that. We're close to the customer. And when you understand the problems that customers are facing, you get ideas that you can implement as an organization to improve that experience and to deliver greater value in the marketplace. So we're very much at the nexus of that. We're doing research, so we're looking at new things. Sometimes we're looking at new things with other business stakeholders, and all of that kind of new information combined with sharing it with different disciplines within the organization is very conducive to coming up with new innovative ideas too. And brainstorming is a frequent part of design thinking or UX in general. Again, new ideas, bringing those together and creating combined ideas and all that good stuff, right? The other thing is evangelizing. Many of you on this call, I'm sure, are in an organization or have been in an organization where folks didn't really maybe initially get the value of UX, and you've had to explain that and sell it and persuade people. And you might have to do the same thing with some of the things that I'm going to talk about here today when it comes to innovation, right? And then, little do you know, but many of you have a superpower as reflected by these tiny little Lego miniature people here, right? And your superpower is that no one else is probably doing it, right?
No one else is probably doing it.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so, with that in mind, you are in a perfect position in UX to foster greater levels of innovation in your organization, right?
You could be there too.
Anyone. I bet lots of people have zero innovation going on right now, right? And so while we are on the spirit of our superpower, I will be very upfront and honest about this, right? I don't have a silver bullet for how to do all of these things, like many things that are hard but valuable to do in life. But what I will tell you is that these suggestions or the things that we'll talk to are research-based, right? And I'll give you a number of different ideas that apply to different parts of fostering innovation in that process in your organization. And the other thing I'll say is that, you know, anyone that comes on and kind of gives you like, hey, these are all of the things that you should do, is never super successful because it depends on the context of your organization, right? So I will present the information. You guys can decide for yourselves what applies to you and what does not, right? So what fosters innovation? I'm going to talk about some different things. First thing is setting expectations. So you'll hear this a lot in management literature, but executives, top management, you have to have support from your top management. That's something that you may need to work with your top management on over time, right? And start getting them bought in. Throughout this presentation, we'll talk about some of the benefits of innovation and things like that that should help with those conversations. But that is, of course, a key element for things like this. Communicating the rewards, right? So what's in it for me? We'll spend a little bit more time talking about all the different types of rewards, right? Or incentives for being innovative, but you have to let people know that they exist, right? Highlighting successes, right? So if there is a good story with the success of somebody coming up with a good idea, actually sharing that. You might end up doing that in an all hands meeting. You might end up sharing it through some other communication channel, but that can be, you know, a double win because it really props out the person who did it. And of course, you're starting to show to the organization it's not just talk, this is happening as well too. And it's a story, right? It's not just 20% of Fortune 500 companies, you know, outperform someone else because of innovation. It's, you know, it's a person. It's more understandable and human. And then two ways here I just wanted to call out. Nike does a good job of signaling. They make it clear to folks that are working on new innovative products for them that this is an important thing. They take that step of having some kind of, what's the word? Kind of, it's special, right? If you're on this team and you're working on a new innovative project, right? They're letting those people know, right? That they are working on something important and special, right? Little thing, but it does make a difference. And then the other thing is you can take a company like Amazon and they're actually really weaving this into all aspects of what they do, right? It's part of the expectation when you get hired. It's key in terms of like the company lore. People are expected to bring ideas to the table and they are trained how to do pitches and how to put together a proposal, right? So you can really make, when we talk about signaling that innovation is important in an organization, you can really get deep into that. Now, I don't think everybody is going to go and change job descriptions tomorrow, so it's not necessarily about that, right? But you can get all the way to that kind of extreme in terms of signaling that innovation is something that your organization should do. So first you have to let people know, hey, we should be innovating, right? This again is Amazon, right? And this is one of the things that they do, which is their press release template, right? They've basically kind of done a great job of having building an army of entrepreneurs, right? So I'm sure a lot of you have already come across this press release template before, but you're really working back from the headline or the news article that you'd want to publish about a product, right? And then what in Amazon, they will add additional supporting details about the product right on pages beyond this one pager, right? And this really just kind of gets everybody into the mindset of like, how do you keep the customer first? I have to provide information about the value of what it is that I'm proposing. And it's important to call out the reality of being involved in innovation, right? In Amazon, less than 50% of these press release templates actually get acted upon, right? So you're not, like, not everybody that submits an idea is going to get something that is pushed out to market, right? And very few of these progress the first time that they are presented. These are iterative works, which often tends to be the case with innovative initiatives as well too, right? So, you know, you have to manage people's expectations. That can even be part of your training or your onboarding if you're educating people to do these types of things, right? And these are living documents. They change over time. They can get updated, right? So we talked about signaling. We're going to talk a little bit about catering to your organizational structure, right? So in very, very exceedingly boring management literature, you will find people kind of identifying two types of organizations, or really more like a spectrum, right? Mechanistic versus organic, right? And mechanistic organizations they have formal controls, they have big hierarchies, decisions are centralized, and the rate of change is just not as much, right? And as you might imagine, organic is basically the opposite of that, right? Anyone hazard a guess as to which one it's easier to foster innovation in?
Organic.
Nice. Yes, it is organic. So this is how a mechanistic organization might look. This is how an organic organization might look and function. And yes, an innovative top management style plus an organic structure can lead to better performance. An innovative top management style plus a mechanistic structure can actually lead to worse performance. So what do you do if you work in an organization that has a mechanistic structure? Perhaps you leave and you become some sort of clown. Or you build a little house out in the countryside with solar panels. Does that have solar panels? I'm just looking at this. That's great. Or you herd sheep. You can tell I spent a lot of time on this presentation. These are very well thought out slides right here. Is what you're seeing. No, of course not. One mechanism for fostering innovation in large organizations is to develop ways to set up a team that operates outside the traditional organizational hierarchy. Sometimes those are disruption units. Sometimes they're called tiger teams. Tiger teams tend to be kind of more temporal in nature. You set up a team to solve a specific problem. It's multidisciplinary. We'll talk about this a little bit more. Some companies have venture arms. They buy other companies that are more innovative. Some companies have external partners. Some companies have startup incubators where they spin off parts of their company to kind of operate independently. But there are, of course, ways that you can foster innovation in large scale organizations. And I would say that tiger teams are splitting off a group of people to work on something. For lots of people, if the organization is large and complex and hasn't really done this before, can be one of the easier ways to get it up and running, rather than trying to convince folks that they need to set up an entire new department. It's a disruption unit, which obviously takes a bit more time. Encouraging new ideas. How do you do that? Well, USAA is a very innovative financial services company that I'm sure lots of you have heard of. And it's worth noting the security guard at USAA has developed 25 patents, right? Their employees submit 10,000 new ideas leading to greater than 800 patents every year, right? So there is something to be said about creating a constant stream of ideas, right? Google. So Gmail came from a submission from an engineer. That engineer it was an inbox for ideas. So this stuff doesn't have to be super complicated, right, to get going. And what Google does then is they try and prioritize the ideas that they think are going to deliver 10x the value, right? So there is a prioritization process. Again, not every idea that gets submitted gets acted upon, right? They also recognize that ideas they don't need perfection. Even at launch, when Gmail went live, it didn't have the infrastructure to be a reliable product or service. That didn't stop them launching it and trying it out, right? So don't let perfect be the enemy of good when you're trying to launch some of these initiatives. Amazon Prime, right? Amazon had innovation objectives. So it's not just, hey, give me an idea about anything and we'll work on it. It can be packaged within the goal of achieving OKRs for any organization that's familiar with those. So they're objectives and key results, but basically measurable ways that you can improve the company. Those that are familiar with OKRs will be very upset with that definition. It's way more complicated than that, but yeah, roughly speaking. And so, again, suggestion. And the original suggestion was just for free shipping, right? And obviously we know what Prime is today, and it got refined and other things got added to it. And I think they're also increasing the price of my Prime, which I don't think we should talk about now, but it's a little bit upsetting for me. Bezos had a small team, met on a Saturday, kind of said, hey, let's go do this. And they shipped it in 2 months from that date. So that certainly wasn't something that was like super thought out or well, I mean, it was thought out, but it wasn't like it was an MVP concept that they put live, right? So these are all different ways that different companies kind of collect ideas. And I mean, you're literally talking about an email in some of these cases. So it really doesn't have to start off super elaborate, right? Other methods include, over here on the left, you'll see a picture that is a stock image. I can almost 100% guarantee none of these people are engineers. They may never have met engineers in their lifetime, right? But over here, this is supposed to represent a hackathon, right? So hackathons are some ways that you can kind of encourage new ideas. Brainstorming, we talked about, and then the email inbox. So there's lots of different ways that you can experiment with this in your organization. 2 important things to know if you're going to do something like this. You do want to make sure that there's actually a commitment to act, right? So that ties back into one of the earlier things we talked about, which is getting executive support, okay? You don't want to start up one of these things and then find out that nobody is going to implement the ideas, because that's going to kill the motivation in the organization right then and there. And the other thing is transparency, right? So why didn't some of the ideas progress, right? Tell them, give people feedback, let them know what it is. So next time they can kind of get more fine-tuned on their pitch and their proposal, right? And you're giving people transparency in a sense into what's actually happening with this stuff. This is an audience participation question. I don't know if everybody can actually talk, so this is a risky slide. Does anybody here have examples of failures from when they tried to generate ideas in their own organization?
We did have a few people that started sharing that they've been on Tiger teams. So or similar projects. So I think there will be some ideas. So if you want to come off mute and share them, we'd love to hear them.
Well, hi, this is Emily Warner. I just wanted to share, I've been in meetings where you're like at your department's quarterly meeting, right? And you're like an hour, maybe 2 hours into all this information that they're giving you, all this guidance and stuff. And then they're like, yeah, and now that we've been doing this, let's do some brainstorming. And now you're expected to come up with ideas about projects that are in a far future state. And you're just like, my brain is totally full. You just filled it. There's no room to move things around and give you something back this spontaneously. It would be great to do this exercise in another format or with more notice or something like that. It was so nice of them to think of it and try, but the timing, there's a timing there that's important to setting a good stage for that creativity. So
I'm really glad you shared that. That is a great example, and I'm pretty confident that other folks have seen this as well too. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I'll just reiterate what I think you're saying, which is hey, a little bit of prep, give people some time to think about it, think about what the structure is for actually organizing that brainstorming afterwards, because I think we've all been there. In fact, I'm doing a talk or a workshop at Carnegie Mellon soon. Intentionally, I'm doing it like this, which is, hey, here's your thing, give me your pitch, because so frequently it happens like that. But it is very much non-optimal, and that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Organizational slack. Okay, so 3M, Intuit, Google, having 10 to 20% of the time free. Now, you'll hear different things from different people, but with Google, I have at least heard that the 20% time may be in your own time, and certainly wasn't continued in the spirit of it after some of the initial publicity, right? But I think the intent here of this is to say that it takes some time, right? If someone is working 70, 80 hours a week, right? Hopefully that's not you, but if you are, it's a little difficult to be thinking about and working on some things that are outside the box, right? Autonomy, cool. Can you actually do anything with your idea? Do you have any ability to push it forward, or are you going to need to go through 7 layers of management to do that, right? And time to manage the innovation process. This is the one that I see quite a bit that is not considered, right? If you're collecting ideas in the organization, if you're prioritizing those ideas, if you're communicating the successes, right? Or if you're responsible for setting up what's going to happen next, that is not an insignificant amount of time, right? So it is important that if you're an organization, you're trying to do this, that you're having that conversation with folks ahead of time to say, hey, look, I am happy to do this, but just FYI, this is probably going to be 10 or 20% of my job, right? This is not a free thing, right? So that is organizational slack, and the ability to do this stuff is important if you want to kind of really compete and be a more innovative organization. Multidisciplinary teams. So it turns out that it is good to innovate with people that are different from you. Shocker, right? You want those different ideas, right? This isn't just about, having people from, hey, let's get sales in here with customer service and, product and engineering, right? It's also about intellectual dissent, right? So can you bring forward ideas that kind of challenge or refine an idea? You have to kind of through practice and through examples and leading by example with facilitating these types of things, to allow that. Now, you probably don't want to do that in the middle of the brainstorming session, right? Where you like crap all over somebody's idea, right? But what you do want to do is allow people to say, hey, what we're doing today, maybe can we do this instead, without having someone in the meeting kind of kill all of the conversations with, no, because XYZ. You have to be able to challenge it, right? Rewards. We briefly touched on this, but I want to go a little bit deeper, right? People are motivated by lots of different things. Typically, there's just one or two of these things that a company uses to reward people, right? It could be money, recognition, greater autonomy to work on a project, right? It could be promotion, bonuses, equity, time off is one that isn't often used, but is, again, like a little bit free. Maybe companies would disagree with me, but like you don't have to have massive funds for that. Or applying more resources to the particular pilot initiative that began, right? So it can actually be good to use a mixture of these things, where I think a lot of the times folks just kind of like pick one or two of these and they're like, let's give that a go. Like, see what works for your organization. There's many different ways that you can actually reward people for their efforts if they're producing and trying to bring to market innovative ideas. Staying close to the customer. So the CEO of IDEO, has this great quote here that innovation is powered by direct observation of what people want and need in their lives, right? And there's many studies that show that companies that are more design focused or customer focused outperform others, right? Just in terms of stock value and all those good things, right? So making sure that your organization is user experience focused, which I won't get into as the topic of this, but I'm sure you all live the daily struggle of trying to make that a reality. And that's, by doing that, that's inherently improving your chances that you're going to be able to be a kind of more innovative company. Permission to fail. So does that mean that, let's just fail all the time? Of course not, right? But what that does mean is that your leadership and folks in your organization are assessing and consciously deciding to take certain risks, right? If you don't know what the risk is and it blows up, that's not really quite as good as assessing ahead of time and saying, hey, look, we want to do this. We know this risk could happen, and then going ahead and moving forward, right? So companies that are known for doing this, Coca-Cola, Netflix, Amazon, right? Amazon, again, I think has some great kind of practical ones here. Disagree and commit, right? You don't need to agree with every single idea that you push forward. You can disagree and commit. And sometimes people just being able to say they disagree is enough to move the conversation forward. Sometimes people feel like if they just go along with it, that they'll be held responsible afterwards or something like that, and it becomes a blocker in the conversation, right? But being able to say, I disagree, but I will commit, and actually commit, not I disagree and I'm going to try and make sure this project fails at every corner that we turn, right? But doing that is very helpful. Another way that can be helpful to foster innovation is not just looking at what was the outcome at the end of this initiative, because not everything that you do that's truly new is going to work out for you, right? So you have to be okay with the failures, right? And again, I think Amazon does a good job of asking good questions here, where you're not just looking at the outputs, you're also looking at the inputs, right? So did we hire a great team? Did the team have thoughtful ideas? Did they think the idea all the way through? Did they execute in a timely fashion? Was the quality high? And was the technology innovative, right? And another way that I kind of think about this, or look at this in my head at least, is it's a bit like poker, right? So if, for example, I was to, if you're not familiar with Texas Hold'em, this is Texas Hold'em here, and there's another card to go, right? And you don't need to know all the details of poker to understand this, right? But what you can conceptualize that is, some cases, the odds are very much in your favor, right? And you may play a hand And guess what? You lose. But you played the right hand, right? And that's very much a way to think about innovation, right? Similarly, you could easily have a terrible hand and play something, and sure, it worked out that one time, but maybe it's not the best way to do that overall, right? So that kind of like balanced view of the things that you're trying is, of course, helpful for you to kind of show and exemplify with your team, but also try and encourage your senior leadership to do. Long-term time horizons. Research has shown that, you know, you could be looking at 1 to 3 years for really out there, large scale, innovative projects to show results, right? Like it can be a very long time horizon. Some companies will actually say, hey, of our portfolio of product and engineering initiatives that we're going to work on over the next 12 months, we're going to dedicate 10, 20% of that to these more risky, larger, innovative initiatives, right? I wouldn't say that if you're working in a company and you're just starting this out, that the thing that you should try and pitch tomorrow is, hey, let's do this massive innovative project that's going to take us 3 years to get a return, right? But this is just to say that really, if you are serious about this as a large organization, then you might need to be looking at a much longer time horizon than some might expect for these initiatives, right? Managing the process. So how do you manage innovation? How do you foster it? Well, we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but design thinking is already part of this, right? You may already be able to work this in with some of the stuff that you're doing, right? You're observing users, you're ideating during brainstorming, you're prototyping and you're experimenting. If you're not doing some of these things, this can be a great way to kind of start the ball rolling, right? The other thing is this is a classic innovation funnel. So it starts over here on the left-hand side with lots and lots of ideas. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to fail early, fail fast. So you might have a couple of different stage gates. Let's say you are accepting ideas into an inbox, right? For anything in the organization that, you know, could deliver organizational value, right? You might want to do a first pass that is, hey, we'll take a look at these ideas. We'll backlog these. These are ones that will actually say, hey, let's put more time into discovery for it, right? And you take those ones and then you put a bit more time into discovery and you say, hey, actually of these 10, actually only 5 of these when we dug into it actually make sense. And then of those 5, you might say, hey, there's 5 here, but we don't have the engineering resources to build some of this stuff. And now we're actually down to, you know, 2 or 3, right? So you're in a very strategic and thoughtful way, you are taking all these great ideas and whittling it down into the most valuable, right? The other thing in terms of encouraging more of those ideas to get to market that I'll call out is it can be very helpful to actually assess the business value. Not everything is going to have a very clear quantified business value. However, in lots of organizations, what you find is actually there's been no attempt to measure the value of this initiative that will in fact take an awful lot of resources, right? So if you find that you have a lot of that, you probably need to require people to spend a little bit more time thinking about the business case, right? The other reason why that can be very helpful is if you have a business case, you may be able to tie it directly into organizational objectives. If you have a business case and all of a sudden resources get cut, the things with a business case stand a much better chance of not getting cut than the things where nobody knows what the value is going to be, right? So there's something to be said about taking the time of just saying, hey, how many extra sales do we think we're going to get out of this? From an efficiency point of view, sometimes you can even just like time people doing certain tasks if you're going to automate those and say, hey, this task takes 5 minutes. We have 40 people doing this task. Therefore, we think the time saved is X amount, right? And maybe you can even put that into a value if you want, right? But taking the time to try and really understand, can we measure this is helpful. I will make a call out here, and I will say that there are some things that are great ideas that you can't measure, right? They just have strategic value and you just don't know until you do it, right? So I don't want to go too far down the road of like, you have to measure it, but you shouldn't have like 100 ideas and you have no idea what the value is, right? The other thing is statusing is another thing that if you decide to take this on that you may have to do, right? So that funnel that I was talking about, where you have certain things that are ideas, they have to get looked at. Once they get looked at, maybe they get into discovery. Once they get into discovery, maybe they have to get resources prioritized against them. And then once that happens, people want to know, when is this going to get done and into market, right? And so they're, you know, when you're working on things like this and you're collecting these ideas, that can actually be a significant piece of the additional work, right? Like letting people know why their ideas didn't progress, or letting people know how far along this idea is. So that is something for sure that is a piece of, you know, setting up something like this that you as a UX person, or honestly anyone could do, right? But it is not an insignificant amount of time. Is anyone willing to share an innovation process success or failure that they have seen? You will not be ridiculed.
Yeah, I'll share one from a past role, but I was working at an e-commerce company, and the team was looking to potentially face a build or buy decision for a large part of our platform. This would be like a hundreds of millions of dollars investment either way. And so we actually sat down and talked to in depth a bunch of our users across multiple of the geographic centers that we were focused on, including for emergent business. And after talking to them, we actually came up with some core understanding of what was driving some of the kind of broad and imprecise feedback we had historically gotten, which was the kind of kindling that lit the fire for the project. And at the end of the project, we ended up actually making a commitment to redesign a significant part of the core platform to make these user flows better, because we realized that there wasn't a good way to kind of systematically take pieces of the experience as they existed today and try to update them. It was actually worth it to go through and do a full overhaul. And I was really proud of the fact that the team was empowered to be actually autonomous, had executive buy-in and buy-in from the director team to say, yeah, like, you tell us how you're doing. We're going to ask you questions and ask you to find and gather more data and information along the way. But ultimately, like, you have to drive what the outcome is going to be and drive towards it. And overall, I think it was really successful.
Very, very cool. Kevin, thank you for sharing that, and great name, really strong name that you have there. And you can tell you're very smart. I'm kind of curious, Kevin, actually, if you wouldn't mind, as I was listening to you, I kind of pulled out there top management sport, autonomy. Is there anything else when you think back on that you'd kind of call out as like these things were like critical pieces to this actually being a successful initiative for you or your organization?
Yeah, I'll say, Kevin, there are some of the things that you mentioned. Willingness to fail. The team split off into two groups to kind of pursue two different aspects of the problem. And the team that I was on, the first thing that we released to users absolutely failed. But that was all right. It ended up being a really good learning opportunity for us. And I think ultimately made us better able to pivot and reconsider some of the feedback we had gotten. And I think the other thing was just like having the right internal checks to make sure that things were moving smoothly. So we didn't run into hiccups with, oh, well, this developer doesn't know what's going on. It was a small team, very focused, and given the time to really establish like a thorough understanding and bring everyone through each step of the process. Kind of, you know, we always talk about bringing people along with the journey. And in this case, that was really foundational because the team needed to be moving very much in sync. And then when we split off into two teams, it was even more important.
That is awesome. That is a really great example. Thank you for sharing that with the group. Would anybody else be willing to share an example of a success or a failure. I paid Kevin to say that it was the stuff that I talked about before, but other people that haven't been paid are free to talk as well too.
Cyrus did have a question that I think is kind of relevant to an earlier section. I've seen too many cooks spoil the pot numerous times. Any observations on the average success rates of internal crowdsourcing versus the expertise and freedom approaches? That was when we were talking about how to get innovation from your teams. So I think that could lead to a success or a failure, depending on how it goes.
That is actually a super great point, right? And I was reading a little bit about this the other day, and it can actually, so Apple is an example of a company that will basically say, and they're structured in such a way that domain expertise wins the day, right? So I'll probably get these departments mixed up, right? But like, let's say I'm in charge of the hardware for the iPhone. I'm making hardware decisions, right? Yeah, I might have to negotiate with other departments, right, to get something done. But the expert in that case is making the decision, right? So that is one way that you could deal with that, which is like you kind of nominate people to be the deciders for different areas of expertise. But I'm sure you've also come across this kind of concept of you're in a brainstorming session, right? I wonder if anyone has come across this one, but Post-it notes, brainstorming session, right? And at the end, everyone's voting, right? We're all voting. Everyone's very happy, right? And then you're responsible for user experience, and you have some idea of what the market is like, right? And what would work and what would not work. And when you've whittled it down to the great ideas that the group has decided, you're like, oh my God, we can't do that. That is not great, right? So I think another way that you can kind of handle that is like you can use the brainstorming session to get to a certain point and then stop it when you've collected some of the ideas, and you can set the expectation at the start, say that product or user experience or an executive group is going to take these and kind of move it forward. So that's a way to kind of pause that before it descends. Like it depends on the group, right? But before it descends into madness, right? But were you going to say something, Cyrus? I think you came off.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay, I hooked up a microphone here. Sorry, this computer is not usually equipped. Where I was really going with that question, I mean, it was a great response. Thank you. Is kind of in the direction. I like that you brought up Apple and Google as well. I did a huge deep learning project myself. I'm in the middle of the second one. And there you're talking about the domain expertise, right? Computer science and programming expertise, right? It's kind of how they put it together, and they ended up putting the domain expert in charge of a lot of those projects, because if you're not qualified to determine whether the thing that you're building does the thing that you want it to do, then you're going to build something that fails. And there's lots of competitors of mine who have fallen into that trap and have come and gone. And it kind of goes to the point to the difference between something like a Bell Labs versus a Facebook, right? So I was just kind of really looking for general comments on that, and kind of maybe if you want to lay down sort of the dividing line between maybe there's some innovation out there that, not to be denigrating, but there's sort of low-hanging fruit that can be chased after in a more democratic kind of flat organization kind of way. And then there's high up, fruit high up on the tree that you really can only get that sort of collaboration among experts in a place like Bell Labs, where those guys were, those were people who were overqualified to be chairs of departments at universities, and they managed to work together because they had so much respect for each other, and they were all real experts. So they built the transistor, and then Facebook used the transistor to build a kind of questionable social experiment.
Yeah, I know. And thank you for that, because I think you're 100% right. And I mean, this is my non-educated off the cuff response, but I think it really does depend on the topic, right? If it's something that your group that you're brainstorming with is really just not going to have the expertise to do it, right? Like I'm probably not going to go into my next meeting and brainstorm methods to develop our next AI model with like people that don't deal with it, right? Like I do think that's a really good call out that you're making there, which is, you know, particularly for more advanced topics, the brainstorming thing can be a pretty bad idea. Another thing probably just to call out is there's different types of innovation. There's kind of more imitative. Imagine I said that word right. I know you all know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Versus radical, right? And so I have worked in financial services for many years now, and insurance in particular is very copycat, right? And some of those things, they're kind of no-brainers, and just they ultimately end up proliferating the industry, right? Like I'm kind of making this up now, but like making a payment in an online account, right? That's a good example of like, it's not really rocket science, it proliferates, right? And for those types of things, people could probably observe those and make some good suggestions, right? But for things that are really more radical and out there, you may not get that from a brainstorming session unless you've got the right expertise in the room.
I think you're pointing to the difference between procedural and insight-based solutions, right?
That is good. You should do this. This would be a better presentation for you to do.
You can teach. I like that. Kim had an example that she was willing to share.
Hi, yeah, thanks. It's an example of maybe an early fail fast kind of a thing. So in a previous employment situation, I was on a UX team that supported internal facing products. And one of the teams I supported was HR and the whole hiring pipeline process and all the tools that went into that. So an executive had a great idea, stop me if you've heard this story already, that the big time sink in the process must be scheduling interviews with candidates. So the innovation he wanted us to design and build was some way to integrate my calendar with a scheduling app and the HR tracking all of the data and responses and whatnot, you know, integrating all of those together to make it super easy for the candidate to just plunk an interview onto my calendar. And then I would be able to just type in my notes as that interview occurred. Wicked expensive for engineering to try to build all that, of course. So as the UX person, I gently suggested that perhaps I should interview a bunch of internal folks who were conducting a bunch of said HR type interviews to see if in fact that would save them time and was a desirable thing. Guess what? Not only would it not save them significant amounts of time, yes, little time savings, but probably not significant. They hated the idea because I know what meetings I can schedule over. So I may be committed to, you know, some standing meeting every Tuesday, but if I've got a hot candidate that I want to interview, I might schedule it over that Tuesday meeting. So after having conducted 5 or 6 of those interviews and gotten the same information over and over again, had to package it in a polite way that the executive could hear it, but basically, you know, saved the company the expense of going down that road of innovating when that wasn't in fact the innovation that would bring any value.
That is a great example, Kim. And I don't know if anyone's ever tried to measure the value of UX and UX research, right? But this is like one of the challenging ones where you're like, well, how do I put a value on if we'd spent 6 months on that, right? But that's a really, really good example. It actually makes me think of, you know, when you're setting up these innovation processes and the stage gates, right? One thing that you can do is have a stage gate to be describe the problem, right? Which can force the exercise that you gallantly took upon yourself to do and trust and verify, right? But I've also seen that be successful where it's like, okay, when you ask what's the problem and nobody can provide any evidence for it, that can be a good way to segue into, well, we should do some research. But you were clearly very skilled at that and did not require a process for it. So well done. That's the extent of the talk. I should have a stronger conclusion or ending for that, but like, this was the talk through, so I'm happy to take any additional questions or things like that now, or you guys can guide me.
I was hoping for fireworks or a cannon of some kind.
I have a pen. I didn't come prepared for this part. That's the best I can do.
That's perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
The pen is ideal.
Thank you.
Samantha early on said that she's seen many failures and the lack of commitment to act is often the root cause that she has seen. I've seen that in other industries as well. What do you do there? Have you seen any good approaches or things you suggest just not even trying at this point to try to get that commitment from others?
I'll be honest, typically if you're going to do something like this, you need resources, right? So you're having a conversation with top leadership, right? Or your executive group. And so sometimes it'll be, hey, we need to be more innovative. Let's collect some ideas. Great. But then you also have to have that conversation of what percentage of our current engineering or product resources are we going to commit to this? And, it's fine if it's fine if you're kind of setting the expectation that we're only going to look at like quick hit items, or, honestly, some of this stuff doesn't have to involve tech, right? It can be a process change, right? And that can be much easier to kind of execute upon. You can even set up the objective with that in mind, right? You can say, hey, this is what we're working on. We want quick hit wins that are not high eng effort, right? So that's one way that I've actually seen this work and got some good ideas that are like not super tech heavy. But for sure, when you are faced with that challenge, in some cases, I've actually said, no, let's not do this, right? Because it actually can become very damaging over time, especially if your company has tried like 3 or 4 times to do things to be more innovative and it keeps failing. Like people remember and then they're like, nah, right? So it can actually be the reason you might want to say, okay, let's wait until we get a little bit more capacity, or let's wait until you're kind of on board with that and let's go do it. Because I've certainly seen that where without that commitment to act, like people they just don't bother. They stop after a while.
That's such an important observation, because you just keep trying and not really trying. You're just going to destroy all that trust and interest from people, I think. Yeah. Any last comments or questions? I've had some really great ideas in the chats. Chat, singular. Oh. Well, this was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really enjoyed that.
You guys were great. This is a really easy one. Like folks were like actually chiming in and telling stories. Someone, who was it? Was it who should be doing the presentation for me?
Kevin. No, Kevin and Cyrus, I think.
You guys should do that.
I'd be happy to talk to you.
Yeah. No. This is very enjoyable for me. So actually, thank you all. I'll defer to you, Julia. Next steps.
Okay. Well, I will. If I don't break anything, I will try to share my screen again to share our next.
Kevin, you said you were talking at MIT soon. Is it possible to get into that, to see that?
It's Carnegie Mellon and
Carnegie Mellon. Oh, great. I was there for graduate school. So.
Oh, great. Yeah. I don't know if they are going to record that one, but if I get it, I will certainly post it on LinkedIn. and there will be some other talks on a similar topic that I know for sure will be recorded. So I'm happy to share that. And just honestly, there's not that many Kevin Philpotts out there in the world. So feel free to just connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll make sure you get a copy.
Thank you.
So Thursday, March 24th, we'll be visited by Kirk Membry, who will be speaking about virtual reality design. And then Thursday, April 21st, we'll learn about content strategy from Jesse Rogers. And then Christine is working on the next several months as well. So we have some really great presentations coming up. And let's see, we had that pass for the Mobile London event. So Kim, I think you are our winner. Congratulations, Kim. Got some good stories to share and you get a pass. So I will reach out to you on LinkedIn to get that to you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And Kevin, you're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. And I think everyone really enjoyed the evening.
Good kind. Thank you, folks. That was awesome.
Excellent. And Cal just shared our social link again. So please remember to connect with us and stay friends with us. Even if you can't make a future event, we love to grow our little New Hampshire community all over the world. It's one of the benefits we're living with right now. So thank you again. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you for all of you for joining us, and we will see you again shortly. Have a good evening.
Everyone. Thanks, Julia.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.